The wind carried the smell of rain that evening, drifting over the dry dirt streets of Ridgewater, a frontier town that lived somewhere between hope and regret. Lanterns swung in the breeze, horses stamped nervously against hitching posts, and inside the saloon, piano keys trembled with a tune that felt more like a memory than a song. That's where Cole Maddox walked in. Dust clung to his coat, and his hat brim hid the exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't look like a gunslinger, though he'd once been one. He didn't look like a man running, though every mile on his horse said otherwise. What he looked like, to anyone who dared watch, was a man trying to bury a ghost. He stepped through the batwing doors, paused at the threshold, and breathed in the familiar scent of whiskey, cigar smoke, and worn wood. It hit him harder than he expected. This was the last place he swore he'd never return. But grief has a way of dragging a man backward. Cole walked to the bar, dropped a silver coin on the counter, and said quietly, "Whiskey." The strong kind, the barkeep, old Deacon Hale, studied him with tired eyes. "Haven't seen you in years, Maddox. Thought you'd settled far from Ridgewater." Cole didn't answer. He just lifted the glass and swallowed the burn. It wasn't enough to forget her. Nothing ever was. Leela, even her name felt dangerous inside his mind. She'd been the kind of woman who could brighten a room just by stepping in, the kind who believed in things he never could. Forgiveness, kindness, the good inside a man, and she had waited for him, trusted him, loved him, and he had failed her. Cole stared at his reflection in the golden whiskey. Just passing through. But Deacon wasn't convinced. Men don't ride this far just to pass through. "Something's chasing you, Cole." Cole remained silent. But in truth, it wasn't something, it was someone. A man named Ward Kettering. An outlaw with a grudge, a scar across his right cheek, and a promise to destroy everyone who'd ever mattered to Cole. He had already kept part of that promise. Before the guilt swallowed him again, the saloon doors creaked open behind him. Cole didn't turn, but the room grew quiet. The piano faltered, and Deacon's face shifted, not to fear, but to confusion. A woman's voice broke the stillness. "Cole Maddox." The glass paused at his lips. He hadn't heard that voice in 15 years. Cole turned, slow and cautious, like a man waking from a dream he wasn't sure he wanted to revisit. There she was, Marian Alder, the one person in Ridgewater who knew his past even better than he did, the sheriff's daughter. The girl who used to ride with him into the high meadows and laugh at the way he tried to braid horsehair. The only person who ever warned him, secrets have a way of hunting a man down. But the Marian standing before him wasn't the girl he remembered. Her red hair was pinned tight beneath a traveling hat, her face worn with worrying, her coat dusted from a long ride. And in her hand, she carried something wrapped in cloth, something she held close. "Marian," Cole breathed, not sure if he was relieved or terrified. "I didn't expect. You need to hear something," she interrupted. Her eyes scanned the saloon nervously. "Outside. Now." Cole frowned. "I've had a long ride, and I'm not in the mood for." "Cole." Marian's voice cracked, but she steadied it. "It's about Leela." The saloon seemed to stop breathing. Even Cole's heartbeat froze. "Leela's gone," he whispered, his voice shaking despite his effort. Marian swallowed hard. "I know, that's why I came. And why you need to come outside with me. There's something you never knew, something she left behind." The old wound inside him ripped open again. Cole followed her out into the cooling twilight, his boots crunching on the dust. The street was nearly empty, but the wind had picked up, blowing small spirals of sand around their feet. Marian pulled the cloth closer to her chest. "Before she died, Leela sent for me. Told me to give you this." The cloth moved. Cole's blood went cold. It wasn't an object. It was a child, a boy, no older than 2, dark hair, soft eyes that looked painfully familiar. Cole staggered back. "Marian, what is this?" Her voice turned soft, breaking under the weight of revelation. "Cole, he's your son." The ground felt like it tilted under him. The sky dimmed, and the world narrowed to the boy blinking up at him. Leela didn't die the way you think, Marion continued. And if you don't listen, if you don't take this child, Ward Kettering will find him first. Cole grabbed her arm, his voice trembling. Marion, what are you talking about? She met his eyes, letting the truth settle like a hammer blow. Cole, Leela was killed because of a secret she uncovered. A secret about your past. A secret someone is willing to kill a child to bury. Cole's breath hitched. What secret? Marion looked toward the edge of town, where the mountains rose like jagged shadows. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The man you've been running from, Ward Kettering, isn't chasing you because of what you did? She paused. He's chasing you because of who you are. Cole froze. Marion handed him the child, his child, as the last rays of sun bled over the horizon. Everything you think you know about your past, she whispered, is a lie. Cole stared at her, heart pounding. What did Leela discover? Marion drew in a shaking breath. You were never meant to know. But Leela died trying to tell you. She looked him in the eyes with a fear he had never seen in her before. Cole, you were born into the very family that destroyed half this territory. And your name, your real name, is the one Ward has been hunting since you were a baby. Cole's voice cracked. Marion, tell me, what's my real name? Marion opened her mouth, and that's when the gunshot rang out. A single bullet tore through the dusk, striking the ground between them. Marion screamed, shielding the child. Cole spun, drawing his revolver on instinct. A shadowy rider stood at the far end of the street. Ward Kettering, the man who had chased Cole across 3 territories, now stared at him with a smile cold enough to freeze the night. And Ward said the words that shattered the last safe piece of Cole's world. Took you long enough to come home. Elias Hawthorne. Cole's knees nearly buckled. That wasn't just a name, it was a curse. It was the name of the bloodline responsible for the greatest massacre in Ridgewater history, the reason countless families had been destroyed. And the name Cole never knew he carried. Ward raised his gun. Time to finish what should have been done the day you were born. The baby cried in Marion's arms. Cole lifted his gun with shaking hands. The pass had finally caught him. The sunset bled across the sky, painting the canyon in hues of gold and crimson. It was the same spot Elias had brought me to, a place that felt more like a memory than solid ground now. I stood at the edge, the warm, soft glow a stark contrast to the cold ache in my heart. My fingers trembled as I clutched the old silver ring he'd left behind. I never wore it, couldn't bring myself to, but I always kept it close, a silent testament to a promise I no longer understood. A cool breeze swept up from the canyon, brushing my hair from my face. It felt like a gentle push, a whisper from the wind itself, urging me to turn back, to leave this place of ghosts and echoes. But I couldn't, not yet. Then, a sound rose from the winding trails below, faint at first, but growing steadier. Hoofbeats, a quiet, familiar fear settled over me, my heart tightening in my chest like a clenched fist. A lone rider emerged from the shadows of the canyon wall, moving slowly, deliberately. I took an involuntary step back, my breath catching in my throat. As the figure drew closer, my fear shifted to confusion. The rider lifted his head, and the fading light caught the brim of his hat. It wasn't a stranger, it was Sheriff Haller. He dismounted with a quiet grace, his boots making soft sounds in the dust as he approached. His steps were calm, steady, measured. I looked away, my gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I wasn't hiding, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't reply immediately, just studied the vast expanse of the canyon before us. Sometimes, he said finally, his voice low and thoughtful, places hold more truth than people are ready for. His eyes fell to my hand, to the ring I was still clutching. That belonged to him. I could only nod. The word caught in my throat. A heavy silence hung between us, thick with unspoken questions. He hesitated, his expression unreadable. Before he seemed to make a decision, he stepped closer, his gaze meeting mine. You deserve the truth, he said, his tone serious. Mara. Elias didn't simply disappear. My pulse jumped. a frantic drum against my ribs. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Instead of answering, the sheriff looked back toward the winding canyon trail. "There's something you should see." My eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What is it?" He held back, his expression firm. "It's better if you see it yourself." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to run back to the fragile peace of my solitude. But a stronger force, a relentless curiosity, outweighed the fear. I needed to know. I had to know. Taking a deep breath, I gave a small, decisive nod. "All right. Take me." We rode to the old mill on the outskirts of town, a skeletal ruin silhouetted against the deepening twilight. The air was still, heavy with the scent of decay and forgotten time. The sheriff dismounted and turned to me. "Stay here for a moment," he instructed, his voice gentle but firm, before disappearing into the dark maw of the abandoned structure. I waited, my nerves stretched taut. Every creak of the old wood, every rustle in the dry grass, sounded like a footstep, a whisper, a memory of Elias. He returned a few moments later, holding a dusty, sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in a familiar, looping script. My hands shook as I took it from him. "Is that his handwriting?" He nodded grimly. I carefully broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The words were stark, hurried. "Mara, don't look for me. Things are complicated. Be cautious around Tom." My voice broke as I read it aloud. "This doesn't make sense. Tom had been nothing but kind since Elias vanished." The sheriff placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "There's more," he said softly. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, tarnished object. It was a badge, faded and worn, a marshal's badge. I stared at it, the pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves into a picture I didn't recognize. He was a marshal. The sheriff nodded slowly. "Working undercover." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, my vision blurring with unshed hairs. "So he kept secrets," I whispered, the words tasting like betrayal. "To protect you," the sheriff corrected, his voice softening with empathy. He lowered his voice, his gaze watchful. "Tom isn't who you think he is." I stepped back, shaking my head in disbelief. "Tom, he helped me. He checked on me, made sure I had everything I needed." The sheriff's expression was firm. "He may have been involved in the very things Elias was investigating." The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I had no idea. He knelt and drew a simple map in the dirt with a stick, connecting lines and circles that meant nothing to me. "He's connected with the group Elias was tracking," he explained, his voice low and urgent. "They've been operating out of these territories for months." My knees felt weak, my entire sense of reality shifting and cracking beneath my feet. The sheriff helped me stand, his grip steady and reassuring. "We need to move," he said, his eyes scanning the path back toward town. "Tom was seen heading toward your place." Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. "My house, my things, Elias's photos." The sheriff let out a sharp whistle, and his horse stepped forward immediately. He swung into the saddle and offered me his hand. "Let's go." We arrived at my cabin to find the door slightly ajar, a sliver of warm lantern light spilling out into the night. It was a welcome I hadn't offered. The sheriff motioned for me to stay put. "Mara, stay behind me," he whispered, drawing his sidearm as he stepped forward with a practiced quiet. We entered slowly, the silence inside thick and unnerving. Then, a voice cut through the stillness from a darkened corner. "Well, here you are." Tom stepped into the light, but his familiar, friendly smile was gone. His expression was tense, troubled. I gasped his name, a question and a plea. "Tom, what's going on?" His voice was bitter, laced with a resentment I'd never heard before. "Elias found something he shouldn't have." The sheriff raised a placating hand. "Tom, let's talk this out." But Tom's gaze was conflicted, flicking between the two of us, his mind racing. I froze, emotion overwhelming me, rendering me silent and still. "This isn't the way, Tom," the sheriff said calmly, taking a careful step forward. Tom's anger finally cracked. I had plans, big plans, and Elias, your precious marshal, he got in the way. I shook my head, my voice barely audible. I didn't know anything. For a brief moment, his expression softened. I know. That's why I wanted to keep you out of it. In that split second of distraction, the sheriff moved. It was fast, efficient, and safe. Before Tom could react, he was disarmed and restrained. He lowered his head, a silent admission of defeat. The strength left my body, and I sank to my knees, overwhelmed but unharmed. The sheriff was by my side in an instant, helping me to my feet. It's all right, he said, his voice a steady anchor. You're safe. My own voice trembled as I looked around the room, at the life Elias and I had built, now tainted by secrets. Elias. We still don't know what happened to him. The sheriff looked out the open door, toward the dark silhouette of the canyon against the starry sky. We'll find him, he said, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable resolve. Wherever he is, we'll find him. Dawn rose slowly over the canyon, the kind of soft golden light that made even broken things look beautiful for a moment. Mara stood alone at the ridge, Elias's worn hat pressed against her chest. The wind felt different today, calmer, almost understanding, as if even the land knew the weight she carried. She wasn't the same woman who once laughed in these valleys, who once believed love was simple and life was fair. Grief had reshaped her, truth had stripped her bare. But something quiet had grown inside her too, something like resolve. Sheriff Wade approached from behind, boots crunching against the dry earth. He didn't speak at first. Some silences were sacred. Finally, he said, "You ready?" And though her voice trembled, she nodded. They began the long walk down the canyon trail, dust rising behind them like a fading memory. Before today, this path had been holy to her, the place Elias brought her to watch sunsets bleed across the sky, the place where he whispered promises he never broke. But now, that same path was leading her to the last chapter of a story she never asked for. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the shadows grew longer, colder. Mara touched the rough rock wall, tracing the carved initials EM that Elias had left with a pocketknife 2 winters ago. Her breath hitched. Sheriff Wade paused behind her, letting her have the moment. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible but firm. "I do. I need to face what happened." The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes, not voices, not memories, just a feeling, a warning. They stepped into the narrow pass, and that's when Mara saw him. Tom stood beneath a leaning dead tree, his clothes dusty, his face drawn thin by guilt and desperation. His eyes flicked to the sheriff's badge, then to Mara's shaking hands. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice cracked like dry timber. Mara didn't flinch. Grief had made her fearless. "You owe me the truth." Tom looked away, his jaw tight. "I never meant for things to go this far." Sheriff Wade stepped forward, his presence a quiet authority. "Tom, end this the right way. No more lies." But Tom's guilt was a storm he couldn't outrun. He rubbed his forehead like a man trying to erase a nightmare. "I tried to warn him. I told Elias to walk away. Those men were dangerous, but he wouldn't. He just kept digging. And you helped them hide what you did," Mara said, her voice sharp with pain, cutting through the canyon air. Tom's eyes filled with a raw anguish that twisted his features. "I didn't kill him," he whispered, the words choked with desperation. "But I led him into the trap. I told him about the canyon shipment. Told him he could catch them off guard. I thought they'd just scare him away. I didn't think they'd." He broke, the rest of the sentence dissolving into a sob he couldn't hold back. Words failing. Heart collapsing. Mara felt her knees weaken, the ground threatening to give way beneath her. But she stayed upright, anchored by a will she didn't know she possessed. "He trusted you," she said, each word trembling with the weight of betrayal. "We both did." Tom covered his face with his hands, his body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear it." A long, heavy silence hung between them, thick enough to crush a soul. Then, in a single, desperate flash of panic, Tom reached for the gun at his hip. Mara gasped, a jolt of ice shooting through her veins. Sheriff Wade's hand moved with lightning speed. The cannon exploded with a single, deafening shot. Tom staggered, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief, then crumpled to the earth. Sheriff Wade lowered his smoking gun, his breathing heavy in the sudden quiet. "I gave him every chance," he said, his voice strained. Mara fell to her knees beside Tom's fading figure. He struggled to speak, blood catching in his throat. "I'm sorry. Mara, tell him. I didn't mean." His voice drifted into nothing. His eyes dimmed. And the last thread of the past snapped. The sheriff placed a steady hand on Mara's back. "It's over." But she shook her head, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Tom's life had been. "No, not yet." They climbed out of the canyon slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on their shoulders with every step. The sun was higher now, its heat relentless. By the time they reached town, whispers spread like wildfire, not of scandal, but of sorrow, of a quiet, somber respect. People stepped aside as Mara walked past. Elise's had still clutched tight in her hand, a quiet storm swirling in her eyes. She didn't stop until she reached the small, grassy hill behind the church. Elise's resting place. Kneeling in the soft grass, she placed his hat gently on the simple wooden marker. The wind picked up, brushing against the brim as if in a final, gentle farewell. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "I found the truth. I faced it. I wish it didn't end like this. I wish you'd just come home." For a long moment she stayed there, eyes closed, tears falling silently onto the earth. Then, as she wiped her eyes, something caught her attention, a small, folded note tucked beneath a stone at the base of the marker. Her hands were shaking as she carefully unfolded it. It was Elise's handwriting. "Mara," it read, "if my path ends before I return, know this: every step I took was to keep you safe. If truth finds you, do not run from it. Stand strong. Your heart is braver than mine ever was." Her breath broke, a sob catching in her throat. She pressed the letter against her heart, letting his words sink deep into the wounds he had left behind, feeling them not as salt, but as a soothing balm. Sheriff Wade approached quietly, holding his own hat in his hands. "He loved you," he said softly. "A man can't fake words like those." She looked up at him, her eyes swollen but steady, a new clarity in their depths. "What do I do now?" He offered a small, sad smile. "You live," he said simply, "and you let the people who care about you help you do it." A fragile smile touched her lips. Hope, real, tangible hope, flickered like the first candle in a long night. They stood on the ridge together, watching the sunlight spill across the fields, warm and golden, a new day rising, a new life waiting. Mara closed her eyes, breathed in the fresh, clean air, and felt something shift inside her. A weight lifting, just enough to let her stand taller. Elias's love hadn't ended, it had transformed. And the woman he left behind was finally strong enough to carry it forward.